Welcome to Look Around Florida, and Sean will be with you next.
Hi, how y'all doing tonight? In the chat, just let me know where you're from. Glad you could be here. We got some cool events coming up. I got Kim Cullars. He's in timeout right now. We'll be bringing him up shortly to kick the birthday party off. So, with that being said, let me get this out of the way so I don't get a phone call later saying, "Why did you say that?" From our region lieutenant commander or division commander and all the way up the food chain. So, we got some cool events coming on. And we got a little bit of news. Hey, Beth, we got a little bit of news. I just found this out about 30 minutes to an hour before the show went live. Hey Keith, good to see you, buddy. Please share this episode. Let your camp members know we are live. Get more people in the chat. I got 7 people watching. As soon as we get a little bit more people, I'll go into the news and events. Then after that, we'll bring Kim Cullars up and get this birthday party rocking. Yes, I am the Florida man. And I know a couple people, Jim Odell, he's under the weather right now. He's probably watching on YouTube. Hey, Jeffro. Uh, that's good to know. Oh, I was working on something, got sidetracked this weekend. I'm hoping to have that for you guys next weekend. Something that me and Jeffro did this past Saturday. To let you guys know, I went up this past Saturday, up to Tampa to help Jeffro Cotton and the early camp guys with their flag site work day. Great day, hanging out, talking with Butch Fox, Mike Herring, Jeffro Cotton. Uh, I did some brush killing for them. So as we and I know Keith with various others of Camp 1209 was out there cleaning up doing their usual work day at their flag site this past weekend. So let's get more people on. I got some good news. Well, it all depends on how you take it. Let me put it that way. So let me just go into the program. Hey, Mary, how you doing tonight? Good to see you, Mary. We were just talking about your brother, Jimbo. Hope he's doing well. I just talked to him about an hour ago. I know he's watching on YouTube. Hey, Dylan. I see you there. Got Jeffro Cotton. I got 3 people watching on YouTube, 6 people watching on Facebook. So, I'm gonna go into a little bit of hey, Dylan, hey, Leon, good to see you. Little bit of news. It all depends on how you take it, guys. I'm just reporting it. After 20 plus years, yeah, Jim Odell sent me this, so take it out on him. After 20 some years with the Major General James Patton Anderson Camp, 1599, it's sad to report that Jimmy Shirley has stepped down as commander due to health reasons. Would like to give a warm welcome to the new camp commander, Warren J. Cut. I butchered that, so Warren, don't take that out on me. Uh, Welcome aboard, Warren. William B. Garrison is Lieutenant Commander. Peter D. Johnson is Adjutant. Charlie Deans is Chaplain. And GB Shirley is still involved, guys. He's doing the pictures and all that great stuff he enjoys. Jimmy, I hope you are get better soon. Love seeing your pictures, buddy. So, with that being said, that's just the news I got. Just got that from Jim Odell about an hour ago. Uh, so where is it? Where is it? I just there we go. Wait, there we go. All right, guys and girls, keep in mind we got a lot of events coming up. This one, it's in 2 weeks. 2 weeks at Homeland Cemetery. We are looking for reenactors for Color Guard and Rifle Squad. If you're going to be there and willing to help out with the Color Guard or Rifle Squad, please let me or our Division Lieutenant Commander David King know. This is in Homeland. This is pretty much a service because of putting in over 125 headstones within the last couple years. Uh, so mark the date, October 14th. It's in 2 weeks at Homeland Cemetery. It is being put on by, let me turn off this scrolling thing. There we go. The Jerbu Early Camp at a Tampa and the Mary Molly Bell OCR chapter. So if you're coming, and if you're going to dress out, please let me or Jim or let me or David King know. Jeffro's in the chat. If you have questions on this event, Jeffro Cotton's right there. He's with that camp and he'll be able to answer your questions on this event. So with that, wait, where's the other one? Next one. All righty. A Lee Jackson party coming up, the 32nd annual Lee Jackson event, Southern Heritage event. This is being put on by the Finley's Brigade up in Tallahassee. Their guest speaker will be none other than our very own division member, Thomas Jesse, appearing as Robert E. Lee. So, all these things that I showing you guys is on our Facebook page. If you need dates, times, for all of them. Now this one's coming out of our division commander. Please join us for the Florida Division event, our Lee Jackson celebration dinner, Sunday, January the 21st, 2024. A guest speaker will be Army of Tennessee Councilman Carl Jones. He is running for Army of Tennessee commander. And if you want to get to know him, know what he's about, go to this event. You'll be able to talk to him. I think this was the other one. Yes. All right. This one just came to me this week. I forgot to upload it earlier. So let me. There we go. This one came out of the J.J. Dickerson camp. Captain J.J. Dickerson Camp 1387 is proud to host the Southeast Florida annual Lee Jackson Dinner and Southern Heritage Celebration, 5 p.m. Saturday, January 6th at the Holiday Inn Express and Suites at 301 Tuckers Lane, Cocoa, Florida. Guest speaker will be the SCV Lieutenant Commander in Chief, Mr. Walter Donnie Kennedy. He is also will be running for a national position, so this would be a chance to meet him, get to know what Mr. Kennedy's about. This program is also uploaded to our Facebook page if you want more details on this event. I've already this time I saved it on my calendar right off of this. Last year I goofed up. Yes, Miss Linda, I goofed up. So a lot of cool events coming up, a lot of cool Lee Jackson dinners. Get out there, support them all. If you are looking for Hunley medals, please reach out to the Florida Division Commander, Calvin Hart. He has supplies in. Please reach out to him. Let's get this birthday party celebration off and running. There we go. I got Admiral Semmes right up here. We're bringing up Kim Cullars. Good day, Kim. How you doing tonight?
Good evening, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime, buddy.
Well, tomorrow is the birthday of Raphael Semmes. So we wanted to talk about Raphael Semmes for a little bit tonight and let you get the idea of what his significance was. He was born in Charles County, Maryland, September 27th, 1809. At a very early age, he was orphaned and had to go and live with his uncle in Georgetown near Washington City. Well, he had another uncle, I think his name was Benjamin Semmes, who was able to get him into the Charlotte Hall Military Academy in Charlotte Hall, Maryland. And he graduated from there and became a midshipman in the United States Navy in 1826, about the age of 17. And while a midshipman, he had some spare time and he studied law, and he was admitted to the Maryland Bar 1834. And about 1835, he got an assignment to the USS Constellation with 38 guns. Following year, 2 years later, in 1837, he was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. It wasn't long after that he was assigned to the Pensacola Navy Yard in Florida. So he actually had a little bit of experience down here in Florida. While there, he received his first command, a side-wheel gunboat called the USS Poinsett, 2 guns. His second command was a brig, the USS Somers, which I read a little bit about the Somers. It was a brig, which was a 2-masted ship with square sails. But more importantly, it was also what they called a cursed ship. Before he was assigned to it, there was a mutiny on board. And there was a midshipman, Midshipman Spencer, who I believe his father or grandfather was Secretary of the Navy. He was tried for his charges of mutiny and was hung from the yardarm. So not long after that, he was able to take command of the Somers in the Mexican War, and he was pursuing a blockade runner along the Baja coast, and a big squall came up, and the Somers began to founder. They were able to save several of the sailors. There was about 9 of them that perished, and about 30 some odd sailors were captured by the Mexicans, and the rest were able to survive and get on the shore. He was accused of not handling the ship correctly, and he demanded his right to a court-martial. And from that, he not only was acquitted on all charges, but he was actually praised for his leadership and his ship handling capabilities. And he became known to be a very able seaman. And later that year, he was assigned to go ashore and work alongside the staff of General Winfield Scott in their campaign towards Mexico City. So at the end of the war, after the war, he wrote a book called Memoirs of Service Afloat and Ashore During the Mexican War. And later he would write a similar book about his experiences in the war between the states called Memoirs of Service Afloat During the War Between the States. But he went ashore and was on the staff of General Winfield Scott. And as they were approaching the city of Mexico City, they were really having a hard time getting into the city. And they ran into the San Cosmos gate into Mexico City, and there was 2 spires there. And the 2 spires had an overlooking advantage over the Mexican artillery. So Raphael Semmes took a mountain howitzer. They were able to be dismantled and transported fairly readily. Took one up into one of the towers, and a young Army captain by the name of Ulysses Grant took one up to the top of the other one. And they had infiltrating fire onto the Mexican artillery, and they were able to take the city. So he was instrumental in his field artillery expertise. And that brought a close to the Mexican War. And in between the wars, he got, he got assigned to the Lighthouse Bureau. And in about let me see, trying to see when he became captain. Became a captain. I'll get that. Anyway, he stayed with the Lighthouse Bureau. I believe he got made captain in 1855. And it was a peacetime Navy he was participating in, and not a whole lot happened until the war between the states started to break out. And he was observing a lot of people in the military academies and the Navy academies that were anguishing over which side they were going to fight for. And he saw a lot of his friends that were choosing to stay, and a lot of his friends were choosing to go south. And when the war broke out, about 1 out of every 4 naval officers resigned their commission and offered their services to the Confederacy. At first, he went down to Montgomery, Alabama to speak with the president, Jefferson Davis, and Jefferson Davis put him on a special assignment to go into the North, New York City specifically, looking to buy munitions, percussion caps, muskets, revolvers, anything that might be of use to the Confederacy in the conflict to come. He was successful in obtaining quite a large catch of percussion caps and had those shipped south. Surprisingly, he had quite a few businessmen up north that were perfectly willing to make contracts with the South, to sell arms to the South. When his decision came, or when his mission was over, he had heard about the outfitting. They were trying to outfit a commercial vessel for blockade running. And as a commercial raider. And he advised the Secretary of the Navy that he thought he could accommodate one. And they found two vessels down in New Orleans. One was the Havana, which was a mail steamer, and it plied back and forth between Cuba and the United States delivering mail. And he checked it out and thought that it would make a good cruiser. So they bought it, and in that area in New Orleans, they really didn't have any shipyards. So it fell upon Raphael Semmes to design what the ship should be like to be an operational cruiser, and to tear down the superstructure and enlarge the coal bunkers and try to get armaments for it. He tried to get 4 bronze cannons out of a local foundry and was unsuccessful. I think he finally wound up going to the Secretary of the Navy and reminding them that there was naval guns at Gosport Navy Yard, which fell to the Confederates in South Carolina. So he was able to outfit the guns for the cruiser he was building, but the railroads were inadequate. There was railroads hodgepodge through the South, different gauge railroads, so you couldn't just load the train with the cannons and take them to New Orleans. He had to put them on one train, take them to the end of that line, switch them to another train because the gauge of the rails was different, and then take them as far as that line would take it, switch it to another railroad, and on until he finally got it to where he needed them. He finally got his ship ready and prepared, and got his crew ready, and he was trying to come out the head of the passes, and there was ships that were standing off and on waiting for him to come out. And I believe it was the perhaps USS Iroquois, and he finally got word that the Iroquois had gone off chasing another vessel, and he got up steam rapidly and set out and made it out to open ocean. The Federal ship was actually gaining on him, but with his superior seamanship, he was able to outrun it. The other ship, the Federal ship, was actually faster, but he was able to, through maneuvering, to outmaneuver the Federal ship and lose it into the weather. Once he was out, he started his depredations of attacking federal commerce, trying to hit the enemy in his pocketbook, so to speak. And from the beginning to end, I believe that he captured, sank, bonded 18 vessels of the North. They finally got him blockaded, and he got into Martinique, where he was trying to repair ship and get coal and that sort of thing. And the international law in those days was when a vessel comes into a sovereign port and a belligerent vessel, an enemy vessel, comes in, they're not allowed to enter the same port for 24 hours after the first ship leaves. And the Iroquois did come in to the ship, to the port in Martinique, and they actually observed the Iroquois landing 2 boats and the sailors rowing ashore, and they could overhear these sailors saying, "Yeah, that's the ship. That's the one we're looking for." So this was a violation of international law. And Raphael Semmes tried to contact the local dignitaries, the councils, and complain that international law was being violated. And the reply he got was something less than satisfactory. They said that, well, you can take it upon the faith of this federal officer that he will not attack you. That would be against international law, and he would not dare to do such a thing. Raphael Semmes was not as trusting as that, and he kept his steam up because he figured something was up. The French did force the Iroquois to go back out and stayed within eyesight of the Sumter. Well, about 1:30 in the morning, one evening, they came and got Raphael Semmes, woke him up, and told him that the Iroquois was coming in. Raphael Semmes gave the order to repel boarders and to light the deck. This alarmed the Iroquois that their surprise was no longer a surprise. And the Iroquois just steamed by and on out into the channel again. So crisis averted. And the following day, the Iroquois had more confirmation or conversations with an American sloop in the harbor that apparently they had hired to be a scout, also in violation of international law. And that night, Raphael Semmes says, "Okay, we've got foul weather coming in. We're going to try and get out." And they said about 8 p.m., the fort in Martinique will fire a cannon to signal the time. That will be our signal to slip the cable for the anchor and make our way out. When they did that, all the lights were extinguished. They did that, but yet they could see that American sloop at harbor with lights signaling the Iroquois. Raphael Semmes figured out that they were signaling the Iroquois which direction he was headed. So he remained on that heading until he passed into the shadow of the mountains. Then he turned and did a 180 and went in the opposite direction. Following morning, the Iroquois was 150 miles behind. So he escaped and eluded his pursuers that way. Not having been able to get his coal, he pulled into Gibraltar for coaling and boiler repairs, but the British government refused to coal the Sumter in violation of their own policy of neutrality. Captain Semmes then sent his paymaster, who was a Confederate citizen and a former U.S. consul, Tunstall, on a French steamer to Cadiz, Spain, to obtain coal. En route to Cadiz, they had to put in at Tangier, Morocco. The U.S. consul in Morocco told the Moorish government that Myers and Tutnell should be arrested on site because the French steamer had put in at Tangier on the way to Cadiz. With no coal and bad boilers, Captain Semmes discharged the crew of the Sumter, and that ended the cruise of the first steam cruiser to fly the Confederate flag. Tunstall and Myers, they were taken as prisoners and were not seen for quite some time. As Raphael Semmes left the Sumter, he paid off his crew and requested further assignment. He was soon found out that they were working on another cruiser in England, hull number 290. So he was kept advised of its progress. There was a Confederate officer in London overseeing and making sure everything was coming up to speed as quickly as necessary. Irving Bullock, who was overseeing everything, making sure everything was right, everything was done correctly according to English law so as not to violate the English neutrality. And it finally put to sea on a trial run. And they took some ladies along for the lark, just a trip out to the head of the channel and back. And they got to the head of the channel, and the ladies were put off on a pilot boat. And hull number 290 kept going. And the alarm was raised by the U.S. consul, and the U.S. hull number 290 disappeared. It was finally heading towards Terceira, Portugal. Raphael Semmes was on another vessel called the Bahamas, and they rendezvoused there to offload armaments and mount them onto the hull 290. When everything was said and done and completed, Raphael Semmes just took the wheel and made a short presentation to all the sailors, that English sailors and other sailors that had come out on the cargo vessel, that they were going to commission this ship as the CS Alabama, a warship, and that if any man would like to join, they would be paid in gold. They would be subject to be in line for prize money, which in those days, if you were to capture an enemy vessel, you could take it into a neutral port and have a prize court adjudicate the value of that prize and sell it. And the various income from the sale of that vessel would be split up between the government that you serve, the captain, the officers, the non-commissioned officers, all the way down to the lowliest seaman, ordinary seaman. and they all had various degrees of pay from the prize. He got probably about 75% of the necessary crew by doing that, and he struck out on a cruise that was to last almost 2 years. They went for all over the Atlantic Ocean, North Atlantic, South Atlantic, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean. When he christened the Alabama, it was noted that it was 230 feet long, 32 feet wide, and drew 20 feet of water. She carried 8 guns, which were 6 32-pounders in broadside. That means it fired a shell that weighed 32 pounds. 2 pivot guns amidships, pivot gun on the forecastle, which was a 100-pounder Blakely. And the rear pivot gun was a smoothbore 8-inch gun. Alabama carried 120 men in her crew, 24 officers. The ship cost $250,000 to build and equip. She went many different places. I'll just highlight a few of the notable contacts she made. In the entire cruise, she captured, sank, burned, bonded 65 enemy vessels. When they were just southeast of New England coastline, they captured a private vessel out of Philadelphia called the Tonawanda. The Alabama had just recently survived a cyclone on October 16, 1862, and had suffered damage in the loss of an upper spar. Fortunately, the Alabama had captured the TB Wales out of Boston a few days later and found that her main yard was almost a perfect match for the Alabama's lost spar. When they captured the Tonawanda, one of the passengers was a 17-year-old black male who was a slave named David White. And he would be held in bondage until age 21 under the laws of his home state of Delaware, a federal union state. Now, every time a blockade runner or a cruiser would capture a vessel, they would take prisoners on board. And before long, they had too many people to man the ship properly. So they had to put them ashore as quickly as they could. And if they bonded the ship, they would put them all on that ship and send them to the nearest port. Well, they took this young black male aside, David White, and he says, I'm going to give you 3 choices. When I set your master ashore, I can set you ashore if you choose, and you can continue to be a slave. The second option is I can set your master ashore and you can stay on board this vessel, and I will put you off at the next port and you'll be on your own, but you'll be a free man. You'll have to fend for yourself and find your own housing and clothing and food. Your third option is to sign on as a member of my crew of the CS Alabama. And that was the option that David White chose. He did stay on with the Alabama, and he became steward on board the ship. And he served faithfully. He went ashore many times, and U.S. consuls in those ports would try to coax him away to defect from the Alabama, and he would not do it. And he was a faithful sailor on board the Alabama until it went down off the coast of Cherbourg, France and he did not survive. Another incident occurred as they were cruising the North Atlantic in the Caribbean. They were putting into Martinique, a French port, and as they were anchoring at Fort de France in Martinique, some alcohol had found its way on board. After sunset, a mutiny broke out on board the Alabama, and Captain Semmes saw that his officers were struggling with the drunken sailors and ordered the crew to beat to quarters. Because of their discipline that he had drilled into them by drill after drill after drill, they immediately went to quarters and he was able to gain control. Then he walked amongst them and determined who were the ringleaders. He singled out about 20 of them and had them clapped in irons. And then he had them lined up by the rail. And he had the rest of the crew dipping buckets overboard into the sea and hauling them up with seawater, and they would throw the water into the mutineers' faces as rapidly as possible so they couldn't even catch the breath. And after a while, they were sputtering and gasping for breath, and when they could catch their breath, they swore that they would never have any trouble out of them again, and Commander Semmes restored them to duty. Never had any more mutinous trouble out of them after that. Another incident occurred about January 11th, 1863. The Alabama was headed to Galveston, Texas, because they had heard that the Federals had taken Galveston. And he intended to take the Alabama up there to Galveston and fire upon the city in the attempts to assist the Confederate forces there to retake the city. As he got closer, he was expecting to see Union Army transports, but he didn't see those. He found 5 blockading ships instead. Apparently, the Confederate forces had retaken Galveston on their own. So Raphael Semmes, he approached Galveston cautiously and flying the English flag. And as he got closer and closer to where he felt like he was recognized, he turned and sailed away. Well, that attracted the attention of the blockading ships. And it was the USS Hatteras that took off to pursue the Alabama. Now, the Alabama was much faster than the USS Hatteras. It would have been very easy to elude and escape, but he did not want to elude and escape. But if he slowed down, then the Hatteras would notice and be suspicious. So he rigged all sail as if he was trying to flee, but then he dragged barrels and kegs, anything that would float overboard, in an attempt to slow the vessel down to the point where the Hatteras could catch them. Just after dark, they were about 20 miles off the coast, and the Hatteras came up. Just starting to get dark, and the USS Hatteras hailed the Alabama. "What ship is that?" they hailed. And Lieutenant McIntosh Kell yelled back with a booming voice, "This is Her Majesty's Britannic vessel Petrel." To which the USS Hatteras replied, "What ship is that?" And Raphael Semmes ordered the command, "Fire." At that time, the Confederate flag burst loose from the halyard, the British flag came down, and the fight was on. It took about 15 minutes to sink the Hatteras, and I think all but one of the Federal sailors was survived. And Raphael Semmes put out boats from the Alabama to pick up survivors and bring them on board. Throughout the cruise of the Alabama, he treated all prisoners, whether they be civilians or enemy sailors, with deference and courtesy. When they got back ashore, sometimes they would admit to that, sometimes they told wild tales of abuses that they did not suffer. But they were able to put all the Federal sailors back ashore, and they were returned back into the Navy. The commander of the USS Hatteras was court-martialed for having been defeated. August 3rd, 1863, CSS Alabama came into Saldanha Bay near Cape Town, South Africa. The Alabama was well received in the Dutch colony, although it had been in possession by the English for some 50 years. They were feted out and wined and dined by the citizens of Cape Town as heroes. They were invited out on a hunting trip, and the hunting trip went well until they returned to the Alabama. As they were getting out of the longboats to get back aboard the Alabama, there was a third engineer, Lieutenant Simeon Cummings. He got the hammer of his musket caught on the gunwale, and it went off, and he took buckshot in his chest and killed him. They had a funeral for him on board the ship, and then buried him in land that was promised by a local farmer. And he resided there until about 1994, where Lieutenant Cummings was reinterred and brought back to the United States by the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. And he now lies in state. He's buried at Elm Springs in Tennessee. Let's see. Along about June 14, 1864, the Alabama pulls into Cherbourg, France. It's been at sea for an awfully long time. A lot of their gunpowder had gotten wet, and they had laid it out on canvas on deck to try to dry out in the sun. And they were successful with some and unsuccessful with some, and their powder was inadequate. So they were trying to make repairs to the Alabama when the U.S. consul in Cherbourg, France, sent out word throughout Europe: all Federal vessels get to Cherbourg, France as quickly as you can. Now, the USS Kearsarge was in Holland at the time, and they were able to get down to Cherbourg before the Alabama was able to get to sea. And they stood off waiting for the Alabama to come out. Raphael Semmes actually issued a challenge to Captain Winslow of the Kearsarge, basically asking him to be courteous enough to wait until I have taken on coal, and I will come out to meet you, and we will do battle. In a couple of days, the word got out, and people were coming from all over Europe to watch and go to high hills and tops of buildings to watch the battle that was about to take place. There was a English yachtsman in the vicinity vacationing with family on his yacht called the Deerhound. And they were able to actually sail out into the vicinity where the battle would be so they could get basically a ringside seat. Unknown to Raphael Semmes, Captain Winslow had lowered chains over the side of the Kearsarge, effectively making the Kearsarge into an ironclad, a makeshift ironclad. The day finally arrived, and the Alabama steamed out to meet and challenge the Kearsarge, and they started steaming around in circles, firing at one another. One observer characterized it, it looked as if it was two flies walking around the rim of a saucer. They were just circling each other, looking for advantage. At one point, the Alabama fired a gun and it hit the stern post of the Kearsarge, but failed to detonate due to bad powder. If it had gone off when it was supposed to, they would have been rudderless and a sitting duck for the Alabama to just rake it from stem to stern. Because it did not go off, the battle raged on, and after a while they could see that they were settling low in the water. And Commander Semmes commanded Lieutenant Kell to go and see what the damage was. And when Lieutenant Kell came back, he says, "I'm sorry, sir, but we cannot save it. We're going to go down." So at that point, Commander Semmes gave the order to abandon ship, and he tried to get the wounded off and onto planks and get them to friendly vessels. The Deerhound had actually picked up Lieutenant Kell and Raphael Semmes and spirited them away. And the Alabama had lowered the Confederate flag. Well, they left the Confederate flag up, but they raised a white flag, and the Kearsarge continued to fire. At some point, the Deerhound was able to get back out of the area and take Lieutenant Kell and Commander Semmes back to safety in France and eventually back into England. That was the end of the Alabama. This was late in 1864, and when Admiral Semmes finally got back into the Confederacy, he was made a brigadier general in the Army and concurrently a rear admiral in the Confederate Navy. And he was placed in charge of the James River Squadron, and they scuttled whatever vessels they had, and they became naval infantry. Their last major battle was at Sailor's Creek, and at the end of the war, the United States filed a claim against England, something called the Alabama Claims, to say that England was somehow at fault for all these ocean-going cruisers to attack Union shipping. It listed 11 different cruisers: the Alabama, Sumter, Shenandoah, Florida, Georgia, Tallahassee, Nashville, Chickamauga, Retribution, Sally, and Boston. The original claim was for $17.9 million, of which $4 million was caused by 9 cruisers, while the Alabama and Shenandoah caused the remaining $13.9 million. Almost half of that $13.9 million damage was caused by the Sumter, Alabama, and the Tuscaloosa, which was a tender of the Alabama, for a total of $5.7 million damage.
Damn.
After the war, he said, Raphael Semmes settled into Mobile, Alabama, and the city of Mobile were so proud of their adopted son that they bought him a house, and he became an attorney there. He tried to make him a judge, but the federal government refused to acknowledge him as a judge, so he practiced law instead. And for a short while, he was professor and also head of Louisiana State University. But in his waning days, he stayed at a home on the coast of Biloxi, Mississippi, called Beauvoir. As a friend of his, an admirer of his, offered it to him for him and his family. And he lived out the rest of his days there. I believe he passed away from food poisoning. It was August 30th, 1877, Mobile, Alabama.
Kim, where is he currently buried at?
I believe he's in Mobile, Alabama. I can't not remember the name of the cemetery. I do not remember the name of it.
Oh, okay.
If you'd like, I can try to get that back to you, and you can post it.
Yeah, it's probably on Find a Grave, I would think. But that's just spitballing. Does anybody have any questions for Kim? Come on, Mary and Jeffro. You both said hi to Kim, so. And I know Jim Odell, he's laying in bed watching it on YouTube. I hope you feel better, Jimbo. Alrighty. Nobody's asking any questions, Kim. I do want to say thank you for coming on tonight to help celebrate the life of Admiral Semmes.
Thank you for having me. I just touched upon just a small amount of it. There's so much more to the man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Granted, you can't trust what's on Wikipedia. And I was just, on there and looked him up, and yeah, you barely touched the surface
I thought
on his life.
I thought it was interesting, my research, to find out that he had manned one of the howitzers of Mexico City. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is. Ready. I'm getting a great show. Mary said, great presentation, Kim. Like always, enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you.
So, guys, keep in mind, if you're looking for Hunley medals, please get with Florida Division Commander Calvin Hart. He has them in stock for camp commanders and other division commanders. So please reach out to him. He's on Facebook. You can also send him a message through the Florida Division website. I think I mentioned that. Kim, like I said, it's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Not a problem. I figured this would be a perfect time because I know you do naval reenactment. You and Jimbo study naval history. Perfect day because tomorrow is Admiral Semmes' birthday. Yeah, I saw an interesting post today on Facebook. the St. Pete camp put it out. Let me bring it up. As long as a soldier's name is spoken, he is not forgotten. That's what we're doing tonight. Where Kim just gave us a presentation on Admiral Semmes, so he will not be forgotten. Alrighty, Jim, gentlemen and ladies, thank you for joining the chat tonight. With that being said, we're going to end the show with one of the faces of the SCV videos. As soon as they come out with more, I'll get them and show them off. Till next time, stay southern and stay hydrated. It's still warm out there and wet.
Thank you, Sean.
When my mother was in college, she danced with Confederate veterans. To me, it wasn't that far away. You know, my father knew this. My mother knew this. Almost 50 years ago, I joined the Sons of Confederate Veterans. In those days, we weren't concerned about saving monuments or any of those things. That wasn't necessary. In fact, none of us had any remote idea that it would ever come up, or we would have done something then. We can't just sit there and react. We have to be proactive.
The Sons of Confederate Veterans is the direct heir of the United Confederate Veterans and the oldest hereditary organization for male descendants of Confederate soldiers. Organized at Richmond, Virginia in 1896, the SCV continues to serve as a historical, patriotic, and non-political organization dedicated to ensuring that a true history of the 1861 to 1865 period is preserved. Membership in the SCV is open to all male descendants of any veteran who served honorably in the Confederate Armed Forces.
It is my birthright. My ancestors fought and bled and died. Because of their sacrifice, it gives me not only the eligibility to join, but it's my duty to join the organization. Their blood flows through my veins. Their struggles and triumphs are what made my family what it was, and in a sense made me who I am today. We're to defend the Confederate soldier's good name, that he fought for a noble cause, that he fought for his home, his wife, his children, and his descendants. We're to guard his history, which to me, it's the monuments, it's the headstones, as well as the actual written history of what happened during that war.
The citizen soldiers who fought for the Confederacy personified the best qualities of America. The preservation of liberty and freedom was the motivating factor in the South's decision to fight the Second American Revolution. The tenacity with which the Confederate soldiers fought underscored their belief in the rights guaranteed by the Constitution. These attributes are the underpinning of our democratic society and represent the foundation on which this nation was built. Today, the Sons of Confederate Veterans is preserving the history and legacy of these heroes, so future generations can understand the motives that gave life to the Southern cause.
We need to draw the line in the sand right now. These are our Confederate monuments. These are our Southern heroes, and you're not going to take them down. Right now, if we do not protect our heritage and present it as it truly was, it's going to be lost forever.
The memory and reputation of the Confederate soldier, as well as the motives for his suffering and sacrifice, are being purposely distorted in an attempt to alter history. And unless the descendants of Southern soldiers resist those efforts, a unique part of our nation's cultural heritage will cease to exist.
My commitment to the SCV is a commitment to our heritage, our cause. Not in a violent way, nor an aggressive way. Simply in the way we live. Live what you believe. But in your defense, know in what you're defending. And defend it truthfully.
If you were interested in perpetuating the ideals that motivated your Confederate ancestor, the SCV needs you. Simply visit www.scv.org today. Our genealogists are ready to help you trace your Confederate heritage.
We're not just some history club. We are a fraternal organization who is essentially the last guardians whose duty it is to defend American and Southern history.
Good night, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Sean.